What's up everybody, Bandit here. So a few weeks ago, Chad and I both ordered something from RCI, our friends out in Colorado that specialize in Toyota off-road gear. And if you've been following the channel a little bit, you may have noticed that Chad is now sporting a new bed rack on his truck. Well, my new modification are in these boxes, and let's go ahead and check out what they are. So I went ahead and cut the box open here. I'm not really sure the best way to show you all this, but there we have it. Brand new rock sliders from RCI. So why I went with RCI? Well, first off, all of this tubing around the back here is 2-inch square tubing. Really nice setup. And this outer rail here is 1 3/4 inch DOM tubing here for this outer rail. And then we have the top tread plate on here as well. Now, a lot of these are upcharges with the competitors of RCI, but the only upcharge here is just the top tread plate. You could get this without it. But one thing I really like about this is all the holes in here are punched upwards. So that should help grab onto your shoes or boots or whatever you have when you're standing up on one of these. So if I wanted to get into the bed or something like that off of the rock rail, it'd be a great idea. Now, why would you add rock rails to your vehicle? Well, personally, I think they look a lot better than a lot of the Nerf bars or side steps or whatever you want to call them. Plus, these are actually functional. So if my truck would drop down on a rock, or if I wanted to pick it up with, say, a high lift jack or really even a forklift, you could probably pick it up just fine off of these. Another thing with RCI is this whole piece here is bolt-on, so it'll attach to the frame rails pretty easily. We won't have to weld it on like a lot of other companies choose. So if I do want to remove it to touch up any of the paint or anything like that, we can do that pretty easily. Now, you may notice that this is just bare steel for right now. I do plan on painting it up and getting it prepped to install, and the reason I did not get this powder coated, so a lot of these rock rails do come powder coated, but if you scrape rock rails, which is bound to happen if you off-road long enough, whatever covering you have on here is going to rub off, whether that's powder coating, whether that's spray paint, whether it's rhino line or whatever, it's going to rub off. So I chose to get mine just bare steel. I'm not going to powder coat them. I'm actually just going to cover it with some spray paint. And the reason for that is spray paint is definitely going to be easiest stuff to touch up here if I would rub it up on a rock or something else, like a tree or whatever else. Also, if you want to achieve your mall crawler status, a lot of people will get these things and ride around with them, and they will stop a shopping cart or whatever else from running into your car as well, and might even help if someone slings their door into your truck or whatever else. We're going to try these out off-road for sure. So what do we have here to cover it up? So I got a couple of these Scotch-Brite pads. I thought that would be good just to wipe down and get all of the leftover dust and everything else off of them. And then I got some self-etching primer and also just some black flat spray paint. Now again, we are going with the spray paint. There are many other options. I would say I would go against the rhino line or any kind of rubbery bed line texture for these. If you are going to drop down on a rock, you do want to slide off that rock. And I think kind of a rubbery texture would a lot of times get you hung up on these, and that's definitely not a good idea. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to struggle to get these things outside because they are pretty heavy, and we'll go ahead and start painting them today. So go ahead and prep all these surfaces with a Scotch-Brite pad and finish it up with the self-etching primer. Alright, so it's a couple days later now, and that should have given this primer plenty of time to dry. Also, we opened up the hardware box and found these brackets. You are going to want to paint those as well. Now, we went to Lowe's and got some of this Project Source spray paint. It is flat black, and these are about $1 a can. Now, with enough cans, I think we can definitely cover this and make it all look pretty good. So we'll go ahead and get that started here today. So after several weeks of painting these rock sliders from RCI and waiting for some good weather to do so, they're finally all done and ready to bolt on the truck. So we'll go ahead and touch up the frame a little bit and make sure all of that's clean so we have a clean mating surface. And we'll go ahead and hopefully get these things bolted on the truck today. Another thing you may want to consider doing is I had a couple scratches along my frame here. I went ahead and sanded that down and just hit it with some spray paint. And as you can see, it does have a pretty nice finish to it still. Here is what I did not paint. I painted some of this, and ultimately I think it definitely looks a lot better, and it also should help improve the longevity of the frame here. So to get started here on the driver's side, you will have to remove the 12mm bolt that holds that small bracket on there, as well as a 14mm bolt. You can see where I took it out there. You will have to remove that as well. That actually holds on your drive shaft. So once you get both of those out of the way, you'll want to go ahead and put your slider on some sort of jack. We have a four-wheeler jack here, and that is the perfect size. So go ahead and slide this under the truck and start getting the slider bolted on. So we just had to remove the slider again and take this little black box off. It had these studs sticking through with two nuts on the outside of the frame, about in the middle of the slider. Then we also took this brake line bracket off, and the reason for that is you're going to have to pull all of this away so that you can reach your arm up through this hole in the frame and hopefully be able to reach the front two bolts on here. They are a little bit tricky to get to, but ultimately with removing all of this stuff, you have a lot more play here in the brake lines, and then it should be able to get a wrench on these nuts up here. So looking here at the front of the truck, we do have to install this bracket. This overlaps the flange here on the slider and bolts to the bottom cross member here below your engine and transmission. So this again has to go on last. It does have 3 bolts in here, and then moving back, you have the little bracket here that we took off originally, as well as a bracket that was in here. We described that one as well. And then there's 3 more bolts to the back of the truck that are up here on that flange, as you can see. And then this bottom bolt here. They also leave you a couple bits of room here if you did want to drill through your frame. It says that can be used for heavy duty use, but it says even without drilling through the frame, these sliders are still more than enough to jack up your truck if you were to change a spare tire or anything like that. So we are not going to drill through the frame, at least at this point. We can come back in here and do that later. But again, these should be more than protective as is without drilling through the frame at all. Now with this whole side done, we'll move around to the other side and bolt that one up as well. So now we're here on the passenger side. This control module here did have a plastic cover on it. That took 2 10mm bolts to get that off. Then there's 2 12mm bolts here at the bottom. We'll go ahead and remove those to get this bracket off the side. So we can go ahead and put on this passenger side slider. So this front plate here does require a good bit of wiggling and finagling, let's call it, just to get all these bolts tightened evenly and to make sure that the entire little plate that you're adding on here does actually draw down evenly. Which one are you at? The back one again?
Yeah. Are you on the back one?
Yep, I'm good. It is moving?
No.
I think it is.
It looks pretty solid when Briggs had moved it. Yeah.
That gap closed down here though.
Okay, good.
Alright, that's tight. So we're reattaching the bracket that we have here on the passenger side of the frame, and we put these kind of brass looking screws, the gold colored screws in here. These were sent from the RCI box of hardware and everything else, but we have to use the brass colored ones to get it through, because since there is added thickness here, since you're going through the slider and the frame, you will have to use the longer screws here. So with all this in place, we'll go ahead and put the cover back on here, and then it looks like we're about done. So looking here at the bottom of the frame, it is very similar to what you'd find on the driver's side. However, there is significantly less stuff. There's no brake lines to deal with there where the frame gets to be boxed there towards the front. And there's only one thing to contend with there on the outside. So ultimately, the passenger side is a good bit easier. but we went ahead and started with the hard side. But overall, it took us a little bit more than an hour and a half to do the install. So here's a look at everything that we used throughout this process. We ended up using 2 cans of the Rust-Oleum self-etching primer and roughly 7 cans of spray paint. Might have been 7.5, but somewhere in that neighborhood. Again, we did try to get several good coats on there to hopefully protect them and ward against rock chips and everything like that. Again, we do still have a little bit of hardware left over since we did not decide to drill through the frame. If you would decide to drill through the frame, I'm sure you'd use the majority of that. And here is a look at those RCI rock slider installation instructions. They do have a pretty good amount of information on here, but overall it was a little bit of a task, and hopefully this video helped you all out. So if it did, be sure and let us know in the comments section of this video. We do really appreciate your all's support, so if you're stopping in the first time, please subscribe. Thank you all very much for watching. Have a fantastic week, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.